Hello everybody, welcome. So my name's Catherine Way and I am the Early Years STEM Programs Coordinator here at Museums Victoria. So that means that I'm in charge of early years STEM education programs and professional development across the museum venues. So that's Melbourne Museum, Science Works and the Immigration Museum. Just so you know, I guess, where I come from, why I'm the person the museum's got presenting these PDs. I spent 6.5 years as a kindergarten teacher prior to coming to the museum. And then before that, I worked in science education with the CSIRO and as a scientist. So that's where my interest and investment in having STEM education as an option for all children really comes from. I also want to thank the Department of Education because they are funding this position for the museum and, providing the money that lets us deliver these professional development sessions and the education workshops for early years that the museum has. So thank you very much to them. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is play-based STEM experiences for the early years. And I'm expecting that we've probably got a variety in how confident and knowledgeable you are about STEM. So let's get started. The first thing, obviously, I just want to cover, what is STEM? So it's an acronym and it stands for Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics. So those are sort of separate content areas that there's some knowledge around that children might need to learn. So, maths knowledge might be being able to count to 10. Science knowledge is maybe understanding that living things have a need for food and water. But when we put them together in STEM, we're talking about something a little bit more than just the knowledge that children have. So we're going to group these subjects together because people learning and working in these fields have a common set of skills and mindsets that they use in their work. And what we're really hoping through STEM education is to be getting children to be using those STEM skills and mindsets. So at Science Works, which is Museums Victoria's main venue where we do STEM education, this is kind of our definition of how we hope that STEM learning happens or would be. So we're hoping that students are engaged in curious exploration of scientific and technical knowledge in a collaborative learning environment. And we're hoping to give students opportunities to develop innovative mindsets and utilise design thinking skills in meaningful contexts. So those are some of the things that I'm going to bring up again through this PD as I talk about creating STEM experiences. So having meaningful contexts, using design thinking and building our scientific and technical knowledge as we use the skills of STEM. So if STEM is all about this common set of skills, let's have a look at what skills I'm talking about. So Bridget's going to bring up a slide for us. So this diagram comes from the World Economic Forum, and they've had a go at thinking about what skills will students require as we go into the 21st century. And this is the list that they came up with. And STEM is a really good way to get students using many of these skills. So, for example, STEM is a great way to get students using numeracy, scientific literacy and ICT literacy. So that's information, communication, technology literacy. So that's in that first foundational literacies. STEM is a really good way for students to use their competencies, problem solving, creativity, communication and collaboration. I talked already about Science Works really aims to do STEM in a collaborative learning environment. So because it's important for students to be building these competencies. And then some of the character qualities that could be built through STEM: curiosity, initiative, persistence, adaptability, leadership are all things that we can build through STEM teaching and learning. Now, of course, STEM's not the only way to build these 21st century skills, but it is one really good way. And it's also a really good way to get students using these skills and showing you what they know about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Some of you might have heard of STEM versus STEAM, where people put an A into that STEM acronym to stand for the arts. So if you look at these 21st century skills, especially the competencies in the middle there, you can see how the arts could be a great way to build those competencies. And that's why people are adding it in, because, STEM is about how are we building these skills, and the arts is another way that we could be building a lot of these skills. We're going to show another diagram. The World Economic Forum's got some other great news about those 21st century skills. So this is their diagram about the best way to teach these 21st century skills. And if you look at that oval in the middle, some of the things that it says in there are encourage play-based learning, create a safe environment for learning, develop a growth mindset, foster nurturing relationships, guide a child's discovery of topics, provide appropriate challenges, offer engaged caregiving, use a hands-on approach. So that sounds like a really great early childhood classroom to me. So we can actually already feel a little bit confident or pleased in early childhood that we've got one of the ingredients for STEM teaching and learning already, which is our classroom environment. You can imagine that teaching in especially upper primary or secondary school, creating this sort of environment described there might be a lot harder. There are a lot more barriers to having that environment available. If that's what STEM is, why is it important that we start teaching it in the early years? Why can't we leave it for later on? So I want to talk a little bit about why I think it's important that we start teaching this in the early years, and about the research around teaching STEM in the early years. So the first thing is, you already know that the early years are when we focus on teaching children learning dispositions and skills. So they're starting to build those in early childhood. That's when we need them to start using them for STEM. A 4-year-old practices being persistent, and that's going to help them when they're 8 and they need to be persistent, and when they're an adult and they need to be persistent, because they've been practicing persistence for a long time. If they get less opportunities and they're not as much practice being persistent, when they're 8, it's harder. So the more practice they have, the better it is for them. There's also a lot of research around when we should start teaching STEM. So the first thing is, research does show that if children have positive experiences with science in their early years of their life, they're more likely to go into science careers and to study science in later years of their schooling. Kind of on the negative side of that, by age 8, a third of children will say that they don't like maths, and by age 14, 2/3 will say that they don't like maths. So that's actually 8 is not so far from 4 and 5-year-olds that many of you said you're working with in kindergartens. And I think that 8 is probably too early to rule yourself out of things that involve maths. So it's important that we are giving positive experiences around maths in the early years, so that when children are getting to that 8, they can remember that they've had positive experiences about maths, and maybe it is worth persisting even if this bit of maths is not, the best experience I've ever had. Some other research that I want to share is psychologists are starting to show that early math skills may be a better predictor of later school success than either early reading or social and emotional skills. And that is linked to the fact that maths and STEM experiences are really good at building executive functioning skills. So self-control, memory, paying attention, being intentional, and working with others are all things that happen often when we're solving STEM problems. And those are the skills, if you think about it, that children need to work effectively in classrooms as they go through their education. So they need to know what to pay attention to. They need to remember what they've been told to do. They need to manage themselves amongst this group of other people. And so working in STEM in the early years of their life is a great way to start building those executive functioning skills for children. The last research that's really important around STEM is about bias. So there is a gender bias around STEM, and by age 4, when you talk to girls about the occupations that they might want to go into in their future, girls are already at 4 less likely to say that they want to go into STEM occupations. So I think, 4 is too early to decide that STEM is not an option for you. And this is a cultural bias. So if you think about the picture that you have in your head of a scientist, especially if you're someone who doesn't know very many scientists, it's often likely that that picture is of a male, probably even a white male. And so that's kind of the picture that we're showing to young children of what a scientist is. And so if they're not a white male, then they start to think, oh, well, maybe a scientist is not something that's connected to me, doesn't relate to me. So you can see there I picked a white male. This is not just a bias problem for gender. It is also a bias problem for children from disadvantaged backgrounds like Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. And this gender bias, I think, is really like what I think my best reason for starting STEM early and making sure that it's an option for all children is. So I'm going to show you a picture here of a great role model for STEM. This is Tanya Hill. She's the Senior Curator for Astronomy at Museums Victoria. The reason why I think all children should learn STEM is they should all have the chance to grow up and have a great career like being an astronomer. How amazing would that be? So working in STEM, teaching and learning, is about providing options for all children to do what they would like to do with their life. They're not ruling themselves out of things too early. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to show a variety of different play-based STEM experiences. Before I get to the experiences, let's talk about curriculum. Where does this fit in the VELDEF? So because STEM is about skills and learning outcomes, skills and learning dispositions, it really does fit into that learning outcome. Children are confident and involved learners. But I also want to flag the important communication outcome, where we're trying to encourage children to communicate using scientific and mathematical language. So this is really important for helping children access their later STEM or science or maths education. So when you start using correct scientific and mathematical language and introduce it to children, they can connect it to concepts in their own life, and that gives them some prior knowledge to draw on when teachers are trying to explain those science or maths concepts later on in their education. So the second thing is, how do we teach STEM? I'm going to say that there's really just 2 things that we need to do when we're teaching STEM. And the first one is we need to be creating problems for children to solve. And then the second thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we're letting children solve those problems that we've created. So if we think about the integrated teaching and learning approaches in the VELDEF, where we structure children's learning using some adult-led play, some child-directed play, and some guided play and learning. When I say we're creating problems for children to solve, this is about maybe we're creating some adult problems to introduce them to new things that they wouldn't experience otherwise, or maybe we're enhancing our environment in our classroom or our kindergarten to make sure that children are encountering STEM problems as they go about learning or play, or learning and play. And then the third part there, the guided play and learning, really comes down to letting children solve the problems. So there's what are we saying to children? What kind of conversation are we having as we let them solve the problems? And then the second thing in letting children solve the problems is often the harder part, and the one that where adults are more likely to go wrong unless they're being quite reflective, is you need to let children own the problem. So this is about children's agency. So I'm going to give a quick example here from the Ground Up exhibition at ScienceWorks, which is a STEM exhibition for babies to 5-year-olds. They have a wind tube as one of the activities, and what children are doing is they're velcroing together foam and felt pieces and putting them into a wind tube to explore how they fly. So do they fly fast? Do they fly slow? Can I get something to hover? Can I make something spin? So that's the STEM challenge that's been presented. And when I was working with some boys on this challenge as we were developing the exhibition, at that stage the wind tunnel was open at the top. Now it's got a funnel so that all the pieces fall into a container. But at that stage, the top of the tube was open and the pieces would fly across the room. And the game, of course, was to put something in and it flies across the room and you go and get it and you put it in and it flies across the room again, and so on and so forth. So that's what these boys were doing. And then they discovered that there was a dial for them to play with the speed of the wind. And so, of course, what happened was the first boy puts his flying object into the tunnel and the second boy has turned the wind completely off and the flying object is stuck on top of the tunnel, which the children can't reach it. It's too high for them. And that is the point where adults need to be reflecting on, are they letting children own the problem? And you know, is this a problem that these children could solve themselves if I stayed out of it? Because how easy is it at that point as the adult to just grab that flying object off the top of the wind tube and pass it back down to the children? So you have, you know, missed an opportunity for them to ask for your help. So there's some oral language there if you did that. And you've also missed an opportunity for them to solve the problem themselves. You know, and this will happen. So I'm not saying, you know, like be perfect and don't miss the opportunity, but I am saying, you know, you've got to reflect afterwards as an educator and think, oh, actually, maybe next time this is what I should do. So what I did was say, how could you solve this problem? So I gave the problem firmly back to those boys and this is your problem. How are you going to solve it? And they knew what to do. They started putting everything into that wind tunnel to try and knock the flying object off the top of the tube. So as I present these play-based STEM experiences today, they're really about how we create problems for children to solve. But that little explanation about letting children solve the problems, I'm not going to go too much further into that today. But please remember that it is important to make sure you're giving children a chance to solve the problems themselves. So let's have a look at some play-based STEM experiences. This is the fun part. So the first one I've got is a little video I'm going to show you. Obviously, you would be doing this in your kindergarten, but I have filmed a version in the museum. So that was a little scavenger hunt through the environment to find something that's the same length as the piece of string. So this is a problem which brings in a lot of math skills about measurement and comparing things. But what makes it a STEM problem is that it's very open-ended. So as we go through more and more STEM problems, you're going to start to see that this is one of the key features of STEM problems, is that there are multiple ways for children to approach the problem and there's no right or wrong answer. So they could find multiple objects, and as long as they match the length of the piece of string, then we could say, yay. Okay. And it's also, if you give children something like this scavenger hunt, when they're coming back to you with their solutions, you have built in a great chance for them to communicate what they know about measurement and size. Are they able to talk about, oh, this thing is bigger than the piece of string, so that's not right. This is the same as the piece of string. This is smaller than the piece of string. So you're able to find out a lot about what they know about STEM, as well as building those skills of STEM as they solve the problem. Okay, so a second play-based STEM experience. I've got one here that uses digital technologies, B-bots here. So I brought these cute little robots, which are called B-bots if you haven't seen them before. And I've dressed them up today. So we've got BA and BB. So, you know, there are lots of different things that you can do with B-bots. I can't possibly show them all to you today. But I did want to bring something that used digital technologies. I think it's important to be using these sort of things in early years settings, because digital technologies are very much part of our world today. And so we do have a role as educators to play in talking to children about how these things fit into their life, what they're for, and how they work, with the ultimate goal that they're going to be able to create things themselves with digital technologies. The other thing about the B-bots is they're linked to programming, coding, or computational thinking that you might hear a lot about around STEM. And for the early years, this is not something new that you haven't taught before. In the early years, we already spend a lot of time teaching sequencing instructions, you know, how do I know what happens next? How do I give instructions? How do I follow instructions? How do I talk about, you know, positional language, ordinal numbers, first, second, third? So how do I talk about instructions? So that's all linked to computational thinking. So what you just need to do is take those teaching moments and link them to the fact that this is how we might give instructions to a computer or to a robot. Using this same sort of language that we do when I give you instructions for getting your lunch ready. Okay, so we're going to give these B-bots some instructions. So they need to be turned on underneath. And one great feature of B-bots is that you don't have to turn the sound on if you don't want to. And the way that we program the B-bots using the buttons on top here, so we just press the arrows to tell it where to go, and then we push go and it will go where we want it to go. So I'm going to get BA to go forward 1, 2 times, turn left. I'm not sure if that's left for you, but it's left for me. And then go backward. So let's see what the B-bot does. Okay, so the B-bot followed my instructions there. So a little game, why I've dressed my B-bots up here. So I'm going to introduce a game that you can play with the B-bots that would get children using some of this descriptive language about giving instructions. So what we're going to try and get the B-bots to do here is a little bit of a dance, and it's the same different dance. So we're going to start by trying to get the B-bots to do the same thing. So they're going to dance together and do the same. And then your next step might be to get the children to get the bebots to do different things when they dance together. So what I'm going to do, I think we'll get them to go forward 1, 2, 3 times, turn right, turn left, and then go backwards. So that was, I've got to remember the program that I gave, which was 1, 2, 3 times forward, turn right, turn left, go backwards. So you can see for young children, you're going to start to maybe need some props to help them remember what they've told the bebot to do. So you're bringing in another step of the programming, which is writing down or recording the code that you've given. And then if we push go at the same time, we're going to hope that they're going to do the same thing. Oh no, what have I done? So there's obviously a bug in my program because they're not doing the same thing. And I do know what I did there. Just one thing that you do need to teach children about bebots explicitly is that they remember all the instructions you've given them before, unless you clear the instructions. So this is what the X on the bebot, yeah, I actually should have pressed that to make the bebot forget the program that I gave it the first time before we started. But there's a nice little problem there for children. Can they get the bebot to do the same thing? Can they get the bebots doing different things? You can link it to storytelling or music as well. So, you know, can we get them both to do the hokey pokey or, you know, the put one foot in, put one foot out? That is the hokey pokey. Yeah. I'm not going to break into song. I don't think I'll be very melodic today. Okay, so that is something you can do with digital technologies. The reason why I brought bebots is because I really do think they're a really great robot for early years classrooms because they're very durable. So you can manage that step of letting children solve the problem for themselves because you're less worried that they are going to do something inappropriate with the really expensive robot. So bebots are about the cheapest you can get for a robot, very durable, so you can stand more in the background, you'll be more comfortable doing that. And you also can let children have that stage that they need with any new technology. They don't want to listen to you telling them how the bebot works or giving them a problem like the same different dance until they've had a chance to grab that bebot and press all the buttons and see what it does for themselves, almost to the point of being bored of the bebot is when you want to introduce a problem with something like a robot. Okay, so let's move on to and another nice feature of the bebot is that they automatically turn themselves off. So that saves your batteries. Okay, so we're going to move on to another STEM problem. This one is around block building. This one comes from an education program at ScienceWorks, which is connected to that exhibition Ground Up that I was talking about before. And this program is called Make, Solve, Create. So the background behind me in this virtual learning comes from Make, Solve, Create workshop. And in this workshop, children are encouraged to get Dot, which is the little figurine that you can see there. They're encouraged to help her solve lots of problems. And the problem that you can see in the picture here is children have been asked to help build something to get Dot across the river. And so you can see these children have come up with a solution there of a bridge. There's sort of two things I want to say about these sort of problems. So block building isn't an easy problem to bring into a kindergarten, which is why I'm talking about this one. But what makes this one a really great STEM problem is two things. The first one is this is a really open-ended problem. So I didn't say build a bridge to get Dot across the river. I said build something to help Dot get across the river. So that opens children up to whatever solution they would like. So children will decide that Dot should have a boat, or she should have floaties, or they will build a bridge. Then the second thing about this problem that allows multiple solutions is the variety of different building materials available to children. So you can see the different materials in the picture there, and we've intentionally chosen these materials to make the problem a bit harder and make it need a little bit more creativity, and also to prompt some of the science behind this workshop. So you can see the building materials are different shapes, they are different sizes, and none of them is really big enough to get across the get across the river in one go. So you can't solve the problem with just one block. They're made of different materials, so you can start to talk about science concepts like what would happen to the wood if we put it in the water. Is it a good choice for making a boat to make it out of wood, or would it be better to make our boat out of foam? Which one would float better if we made a boat? So this is how you're bringing your science content into a problem like this as you're talking to children. And you can also start to talk to them about linking it to their real world knowledge of rivers, bridges, boats. So things like the water is going to get stopped by your bridge because there's no space underneath, or boats can't get under your bridge, it's not high enough. And that encourages children to redesign and rethink and build something that's even better. So being intentional with the materials that you choose when you're presenting STEM problems, and keeping the problem really open-ended to allow for multiple possible solutions and multiple ways to approach the solution are some of the elements of a really great STEM problem. Okay, so let's move on to our next experience. And so I'm actually getting you to look at these other materials that I have on the table here. So these come from a learning kit available from the museum called Drawing on Nature. You, of course, don't need to have a kit from the museum to do this experience I'm about to present. The idea is that you're looking at natural materials from your playground. So that might be animals, or it might be plants. So when you go on a walk, what do we find? Or, just go out in the playground and have a look. What different things do we find? And so the problem here is engaging children in using real-world tools that people working in STEM would use, like the magnifiers. You can even bring in some digital technologies with a digital magnifier. So their children are practicing some of the skills of natural scientists by looking really closely at the objects and looking for patterns, observing similarities and differences. And that is actually the basis for our maths skill of comparing as well. Our maths skill of measurement when we're comparing things. So you can start comparing the shells in terms of size, in terms of weight, in terms of colour, in terms of pattern, in terms of shape. And so this, links to later on when we're going to measure the size, or when we want to sort things into different categories, when we want to classify things. So that's a link there between the science knowledge and the maths knowledge. But really why I'd encourage you to do something like this and have children looking closely at items from the natural world is just the link to what scientists really do. So, the job of biologists is to go out into the world find things, look at them really closely and identify them. And that's a problem that you can give to children just like that, like probably happens all the time. You've got some insect mad child in your classroom or kindergarten, and they go outside and they come back at the end of outside playtime or in 5 minutes after you've let them out the door, and they're bringing you some sort of bug and asking you, what bug is this? So that's the STEM problem there, where you're involving children in having a close look at that insect, in maybe drawing and describing the insect, and then you can get out your field guides or apps and identify the insect. So they're doing the work that a real scientist would be doing there. And then you can extend on that by looking at, like, if this insect has got antenna, why does it have antenna? What do they think the antenna are for? So you're starting to have lots of great science conversations there. Okay, so linked to that experience that I just showed you, another way that we can practice sorting, comparing and classifying living things, this is a bit of a matching game where we have got some magnified objects and then we have the animal. And what we're going to do is we are going to match the magnified image to the correct animal. And you are actually going to do this activity using a feature in Zoom called annotation. And so what you need to do is you need to look at the top of your screen and click View Options. And then in View Options, you need to click Annotate. And in Annotate, you need to click Draw. And then you need to choose one of the squiggly lines. And then you can draw your answers for me. Please match the magnified images to the animals. I could see lots of people doing that, lots of colours appearing on my screen here. So, this is modified to suit the fact that we're doing virtual learning. If I was doing this in a classroom setting with children, I might have the magnified images plus, a figurine of a butterfly or a tiger or an owl. And then you can also, go that step further and get children to take their own magnified images. So again, you're linking to the technologies of our world. How do we magnify things? How do we take a photo? And connect into the work of close looking that scientists do. Thank you, everybody, for your matching there. I think everybody got it right. Not super difficult challenge for adults. Okay, so we have got another challenge that I'm going to get you to participate in with our natural world objects, and this is a sorting game. So I often find that even though we know that sorting is a skill that we want children to start practicing when they're 4, 5 and 6, it's really hard to figure out how to introduce it because children, I think, are often unfamiliar with the language that we start to use when we're asking them to sort something. And then the other thing to be aware of is, this is something that children have been doing since they were born. So as soon as they're born, children start classifying their world and sorting it into different categories. That's why a 4-year-old can tell you that a cat is different from a dog, because they've started sorting things in their world. But it's a problem of how do we help them to share that knowledge. So this is a sort of game that can help children to start sharing their knowledge about similarities and differences between things. And I have to give some credit here to a book called Messy Maths. Okay, so what we've got is we've got a hoop. Let's pull this out to my hoop. And where's the best place to put these things? I've got a lot of different leaves, so I don't want them to be too spread out because we're going to sort. What we're going to sort is in the hoop or out of the hoop. So We're just sorting into two categories. Does our thing go in the hoop or outside the hoop? And I'm going to call this is in the hoop, obviously, and I'm going to put outside the hoop over here, away from where I've already picked the objects. So what Bridget is going to do is she's going to ask some people to choose one of the leaves, flowers or feathers, so things that you might find if you were hunting outside in your playground, and they're going to tell me if their object should go in the hoop or outside the hoop. So I can point to them all if you...
The pink leaf.
This one?
Yep, that can go in.
In the hoop?
Yep.
Okay. So now we need somebody else, and they are going to choose something and decide whether it goes in the hoop with the pink leaf or outside the hoop. And they're going to tell us why they made that choice. All right, Jodie Stewart.
I choose the other pink leaf.
So I think this one's actually a flower.
Oh, flower, pink flower in the hoop.
In the hoop. Why did you put it in the hoop?
Same colour.
Same colour. Excellent. Okay, who's next?
Hello. I choose there's a big green leaf, maybe just at the top, maybe back towards yourself, Catherine.
This one?
No, really back towards yourself, just because I like it. It looks
that
great.
one.
Yeah, that one.
It looks more brown than green to me. In the hoop or outside the hoop?
In the hoop.
In the hoop. Why did you put that one in the hoop?
Because the shape of it reminds me of the flower.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's have someone else. So Rosanna, can you choose something?
Yeah, one of the pointy leaf, the
This
green
one?
pointy leaf. Yes, that one. Out of the hoop.
Where did you want to put it?
Out of the hoop.
Out of the hoop.
Out.
Right.
Yeah. Because it has one, only one pointy, sort of like,
Only 1 point.
leaf.
Yeah. Okay.
And the other one has, like, the ones that are inside have more shapes.
Yeah.
Around. Yeah.
Yep. All right, I understand. So you can see that we're starting to get lots of different reasons for sorting. This is a STEM problem, so it's open-ended. So we're not going to be telling children about right or wrong answers here. We're going to accept all of their answers. But you can also see how this conversation that we're doing as we sort is really starting to help us find out what children already know, not just about leaves, feathers and flowers, but about similarities and differences and some of those math skills of comparison and measurement. Okay, so that is it for the activities that I wanted to show you today. Thank you very much for joining in, and I hope you enjoyed today's session, and you'll be getting an email from us in the next few days. Thank you.